Hi guys, it's Mark from No Book Left Behind, and today we'll be looking at my 48-hour spooky Halloween reading marathon. So welcome to my 48-hour spooky Halloween reading marathon. And yes, that's exactly what it is. I'm going to be spending the next 48 hours, apart from sleep, comfort breaks and eating, just reading spooky books for Halloween. And I've got 6 books that I've got lined up here on the table beside me. Now, to explain briefly, I'm not going to get to all 6. That's pretty unlikely. And it's not a contest anyway. I'm not here trying to prove how quick a reader I am or anything silly like that. The reason there are 6 is because I don't like to be that organised. I like to be flexible. So I've got 6 to pick from as I go through. I may only end up reading one of them. That would be kind of boring, but that might happen. I might end up reading 3 or 4. Who knows? We'll find out as we go. So the 6 books I've got to pick from that I've specially selected are the following, and I'll be reading the blurbs to you when I get round to them within the video, not now. I'm just going to cover the titles at the moment. And the first one we've got is this wonderfully titled book, Vampires of the Andes by Harry Carew. Now this is apparently Lost World literature with a spooky horror vibe, which apparently also includes robots, I read somewhere. Obviously, that was just simply something I couldn't resist. Second in the pile is another in the British Library's Tales of the Weird series. I've already reviewed the first 3 in a previous video. This is actually number 5 because I've already read number 4. This is number 5, The Phantom Edge. Oh, sorry, The Platform Edge. Get it right, Mark. Uncanny Tales of the Railways. That's number 2 on the pile. Next up is an intriguing book indeed, which is called Ghostland, An American History in Haunted Places. Now, this is not fictional, it's factual. It's by a guy called Colin Dickey. And yeah, that's basically, it's there in the title. That's what he's doing with this book. It sounds unusual and it sounds like it might be pretty interesting. And I felt like there had to be some factual stuff on here as well as fiction. Fourth on the pile, and this one is one of the Hammer Horror movie tie-in novelizations by a guy called Michel, which is Countess Dracula, which of course was a wonderful 1970 movie with Ingrid Pitt. Next up is the real wild card of the 6. I really don't know whether I'm going to get round to this or not, simply because I don't really know whether it's horror. I don't really know anything about the book itself at all. To explain, it's called The Spirit of the Town, a novel presentation in fiction form of the impulse and desire which mould the lives of men. Which certainly doesn't sound all that appealing, but it's by a guy called Todd Robbins. And if you're not familiar with Robbins, he was the guy who wrote the short story Spurs, which the notorious and controversial 1932 movie Freaks was based on. So I am looking forward to reading some of his work, and this was basically a cheap copy of his debut novel, so I thought I'd start with that. And finally on the pile, let's get the last one off here. This is another factual one, well, sort of folklore factual, Vampires, Burials and Deaths by Paul Barber, which as far as I can make out is basically a factual telling of the historical basis for tales of vampirism. And being someone who's really, really into folklore, this seemed like a must read to me. So those are the 6 I'm going to be reading from. How many I get through, who knows? Which one will I start with? I don't know that yet. But right now, I'm off to get some breakfast because it's bloody early in the morning and I need to fill up. See you in a minute. So let's get this spooky Halloween reading marathon on the road. And I've moved into the lounge for 2 reasons. It's comfier in here, and it's also come over very dark outside and raining really hard now. Hopefully you won't be able to hear that on the audio for this video. But the daylight's better in here for filming, and it's a comfier setup anyway, obviously, for long distance reading, if you want to call it that. So the first book I've picked is Michel Parry's Countess Dracula. Now, it's a novelisation tie-in of the movie from Hammer from 1971. And I'll be perfectly honest, the reason I picked this is because it should be a quick and easy read. Because what I don't want to do, obviously, is make a video where I just read one book, because that would be extremely boring. However good the book was. So that's why I've picked this one to start with, because I think I'll probably get through it fairly quickly. Let's do it. Let's read you the back. Let's read you the blurb. First, reluctantly they parted their bodies. Her hand found his and held it tightly as he hesitated in the doorway. He blew her one last kiss and was gone. The Countess moved slowly to the small window and peered up at the vivid moon. Her cheeks were flushed red with excitement and apprehension. She bit her lip to stop it quivering. Tomorrow, she foresaw, she would feast on his young body, and she would make love as she had not done in 20 years. Filmed by Hammer, this story is loosely based on the infamous Countess Elizabeth Bathory, the real-life vampire who bathed in the blood of virgins in order to preserve her youth. Which is probably complete bollocks, as I understand it. If you go down the Elizabeth Bathory rabbit hole on the internet, you find that lots of modern-day scholars throw doubt even on the fact that she ever killed anyone at all. She was supposed to have killed 600 women, virgins, and bathed in their blood in order to retain her youth, so she wasn't technically a vampire anyway. But now that's thought of as to be possibly propaganda from the time, and that she was basically arrested, put under house arrest for the rest of her life, and removed from the public life simply because she had too much influence, and it was kind of politically motivated, and because she was a woman, obviously. Anyway, let's give the book a bash. Coffee first, and then we'll get going. So it's 12:30 on day one, and I've been reading for about 3.5 hours, and I've just finished Countess Dracula, which is the first book in my reading marathon, and I enjoyed it. It was a very efficient, skillful novelisation of the 1971 Hammer movie. Not much different from the film, only a couple of very minor differences. But I'll talk about those and more about it when I review the book. Interestingly enough, in the middle of the book, there is actually a photo spread of black and white stills, but not from the movie as you'd expect, but from a photo shoot presumably arranged by the publisher's Redemption, featuring a couple of models in various Countess Dracula kind of situations. Can't show them to you because there are naked breasts involved, and we know YouTube doesn't like those. But yeah, that's the first book done in my reading marathon, and as I say, it's 12:30, so I'm now off to put some food on and get some dinner. But I'll be back while that's cooking to talk about book number 2. So I've got some pasta on the stove, and while that's boiling, let's dive into the second book in this 48-hour reading marathon. And this one is a bit unusual and certainly different from the last. This is Ghostland, an American history in haunted places. And to read you the back of the blurb, it says here, an intellectual feast for fans of offbeat history, Ghostland takes readers on a road trip through the country's most infamously haunted places and deep into the dark side of our history. And there's some reviews on the back here. I'll read you one of them. It says, the good news, nothing's really haunted except by the spirits we imagine for ourselves. The bad news, we'll make anything haunted. The great news, there's Ghostland. Colin Dickey gets to the heart of the matter over and over, skirting any tourist trap sensationalism in favour of historical context that touches on the longing and tragedy underneath ghost stories. It's a tour of America's haunted places that takes an insightful look at how ghost stories are made, how ghosts and historical visibility are so tightly intertwined, and why we keep looking for the dead. and that's a review from NPR. So yes, this promises to be very different and hopefully quite fascinating. It certainly has great reviews. So yeah, let's start delving into that while my pasta cooks on the stove. Okay. Right, so it's now late evening. I've been reading Ghostland since just after lunch, so it's taken me a while to get into it, which is partly the reason it's taken so long to get to this point where I am only a chapter from the end. I'm not going to tell you my thoughts about it right now because I'm going to go up to bed and finish it, and I'll join you again in the morning and share my insights with you there. So it's been a long day, but very rewarding, and I'll see you, well, in probably about 30 seconds. Morning, it's Mark again. This is my 48-hour spooky Halloween reading marathon, and this is day 2. So, first order of business is to talk about Ghostland by Colin Dickey, which I finished last night. Oh, before I do that, how about this? This is my current bookmark. Seems appropriate. There's a sort of skeleton on there riding on a griffin's body or something. I think it might be a Hieronymus Bosch thing. I'm really not sure. I don't know much about art. I got that from the Fitzwilliam Museum in Cambridge, and I've been using that. Seemed appropriate. So let's talk about Ghostland by Colin Dickey, which I finished last night. And I would recommend this one. I mean, it took me a while to get into it, but I think that was because there's not really a great deal of structure in how he presents his information. Not that that's a bad thing. I think it works. It just takes some getting used to. So what's Ghostland then? What's it about? Well, it's a historical book, a factual book about ghost stories in America, all across America. And I would recommend it to you, but with one certain caveat. It's not about proving or disproving individual hauntings. There's plenty of information about them, but that's not what he's interested in. So what the book's actually about is he basically is examining the cultural and human need for us to believe in ghosts, and more importantly, why and how we tell our ghost stories. So he delves into a lot of the historical facts behind some of these hauntings, and how they've been distorted over the years and reshaped to fit classical ghost story tropes and cliches. And I found that very interesting. And he also deals with the why, and that is fascinating because, for example, there's the monetization, there's dark tourism, which is a big thing now. Most definitely. And there's an interesting chapter where he's in Hollywood, California, and he talks about how many groups of ghost hunters there are now, how many organizations, if you like, of these people who are not really carrying out serious paranormal investigations, but they've got YouTube channels and they're posting, but he's kind of the opinion that basically it's all about catching the eyes of television producers and trying to get a show out of it. And he quotes a ghost hunter from the area who no longer actually involves herself, and she says something which made me smile, which she says, how come there aren't any non-famous ghosts anymore in California? Everyone is a famous person, and that's stupid. So yeah, I thought that was quite funny. The other thing he talks about is how it's a way of dealing with past events and past horrific events, and how it's kind of a way of sanitizing them, almost cozyfying them. There's one area he talks about I'm never going to remember what it is now, but it's an area more of a rural southern area in America, where they had a big slave plantation, and there are ghost tours that you can go on around this particular area. But funnily enough, all the ghosts they talk about and the hauntings they deal with aren't hauntings by ghosts of slaves or black people. They're all by the more affluent white people who lived in the area at the time. So it's kind of a way of codifying the past, of kind of like glossing over some of the more horrific things by imposing something that's still horrible, but it's horrible in a kind of a fictional way almost, if you know what I mean, a more culturally acceptable way. And I do find all this stuff, as I say, I do find it's very interesting, and he has certainly done a huge amount of research and travel as well in order to compile the book. And I would recommend it if all this sounds quite interesting to you. I mean, it's not overly heavy, it's not hard to understand or overly dry. That's the word I'm after. It's not dry and academic. It's not like that. It's perfectly accessible. Because if it was dry and academic, I wouldn't enjoy it, quite honestly. But no, it's perfectly accessible and great fun. So I would say, and most importantly though, it's good food for thought. It makes me think about certain things and makes you wonder about, when you hear a ghost story, about what's kind of behind it and what's behind the way it's being told to you now, which is the most interesting part. Anyway, that was Ghostland. I did enjoy it a great deal, and I'm moving on from there to my third book on the second day, so it's not too bad. I got two out of the way in day one. I'm quite impressed with that. So I'm moving on to my third book, which is another of the British Library's Tales of the Weird series, and that's The Platform's Edge, which is about haunted railway stories. I could tell you a few interesting railway stories, actually, drunken ones, but we won't go there. Instead, we'll stick with the ghosts, I think. So, right, so yeah, I've got my coffee, so let's get started. So it's early afternoon, and I have just finished The Platform Edge, Uncanny Tales of the Railways, the British Library's Tales of the Weird series, Book 5. And yeah, I have to say it was a very entertaining quality anthology. Interesting that the editor felt they had to include a couple of bit later stories, whether there wasn't quite enough in the sort of like Victorian Edwardian period. They felt it had to go a little bit later. I think there's a couple here from the 1950s. And 60s even. I think and the Ramsey Campbell story that's included is actually from the 1970s, I believe. So yes, that was a bit of a surprise, not an unwelcome one necessarily. Yeah, the biggest shock, I suppose, was to find a story by F. Scott Fitzgerald in here, which I certainly didn't expect. I did, many years ago, read, I think, nearly all Fitzgerald's work, if not all of it, because I was so impressed with The Great Gatsby. Unfortunately, I have to admit, I found a lot of it incredibly tedious. There you are. Not for everyone, perhaps. So, out of these stories, my two highlights were Edgar Wallace's The Barford Snake, which surprised me because I've heard of Wallace. I don't think I've ever read anything by him before, which is surprising considering he managed 170 novels in his lifetime and contributing to the original script of King Kong. But yes, I like that story. But I think my standout here was The Underground by R. Chetwynd Hayes. Now, I'm familiar with Chetwynd Hayes as a name simply because there was a movie back in 1980, an anthology movie with Vincent Price and John Carradine called The Monster Club, and that was based on some of his stories. So that's how I knew his name. But I was very impressed with the story here. I really did like The Underground a lot, and I think I'll be checking out some more of his work. So yes, a quiet recommendation from me. And the British Library's Tales of the Weird series carries on doing the business. So what next, you may ask? Well, there's time for another novel, isn't there? Surprisingly. So I'm going to take a bit of a flyer on my wild card, which is The Spirit of the Town. Let's give it its full title. A novel presentation in fiction form of the impulse and desire which mould the lives of men. And this is a 1909 novel by Todd Robbins, who I've never read any Robbins stuff at all, but he later became known for being the guy who wrote Spurs, the short story which Todd Browning's movie Freaks was based on, a movie that was banned in the UK for decades. That's what he's famous for. As a film nut, I am aware of some of his other work. He wrote a novel called The Unholy Three, which was filmed a couple of times with Lon Chaney. One sound version, one silent version. I couldn't remember what it was for a minute. Yes, so I am familiar with his work a little bit, and I've heard it's supposed to be quite odd and strange and worth checking out. So I thought this was a cheap copy. I thought I'd get this and give it a go. What I love about it in particular was that Forgotten Books, this company here who published it, have actually, what they've done is they've taken a copy from the New York Public Library and simply scanned it in to some software to create the book. Can you know this? Because in the front here, there are a couple of, I don't know if this will focus and whether you'll be able to see this properly, but there are a couple of New York Public Library stamps in the front there, which I do think is actually, somehow I really appeals to me. I think that's great. And so I'm going to give this a go next, and I'll see you on the other side. Now that was a surprise. I got through this in a couple of hours. It's very readable, but very much of its time. It was written in 1909 and it's very melodramatic. That's being quite kind. It's about as subtle as a brick in the face, to be honest. The story is about a young man called Jim Holiday who leaves his small town home to travel to New York to make it as a writer, something he sees as inevitable because he's the most talented writer who ever lived. Oh, we've all been there, haven't we? When he gets to the metropolis, he falls in with several characters, the most prominent of which being three of them, in fact. George Wilmot, his ex-college buddy who he rooms with, their other roommate, Phil Hardy, who's very much a stick in the mud, I guess you'd say, if you were being unkind. Very, very straight and serious. The other guy that they are involved with is a guy called Dick Norman, who is a man about town, incredibly influential, knows everybody, he's a corrupting influence, to put it mildly, on many people. And it does not take a genius to see fairly early that he's supposed to represent Satan, or actually possibly even be Satan by the time we get to the end of the story. It's pretty overt. Hardy represents God, if you like, the sources of light, and they war over Holiday's soul while Norman spends a lot of time corrupting everyone else around him. And there's kind of, it's very moralistic, highly moralistic. There's lots of themes such as art versus commerce, country versus city. I think you know which sides those two things fall on. It's not exactly subtle, as I say. But I got through it very quickly. It hasn't put me off reading any more of Robbins' work, as this was the first of his books I've ever read. But it didn't encourage me to do so either, although I already have a copy of The Unholy Three, which was, I think, his follow-up to this. So I will be reading that at some point. So having finished early, because it's actually still light outside, so it's not even early evening, I've got time for another book, which I confess completely surprised me. So there are only two left on the pile, and I've picked Vampires, Burial and Death by Paul Barber, which is more of a factual, folkloric take on the vampire and some of the evidence, if you like, of the reality of them. I really don't know. Some of the history, some of the folklore, the tales, hopefully. And we'll see how that goes. And I'm going to start reading that now. I don't believe I'm going to finish it today. I think that would be hoping a bit too much. It's a couple of 100 pages and it is quite small print. So I think probably I'm just going to be giving you my initial thoughts on it later tonight, and one last clip before I head for bed, and I'll probably finish it tomorrow. And I may review it on the channel, and I may not. It depends what I think of it. So yeah, that's it for the moment. And let's get into a bit of vampires, which is very appropriate for Halloween, obviously. Well, that's it for my 48-hour Halloween spooky reading marathon. I got about halfway through this one in the end, Vampires, Burial and Death, and I would say it's pretty interesting stuff, going on about the historical record of vampirism, which is far more complex than you might think, far more unfocused, I think is the best term to use to describe the mythology. It's kind of all over the place, and mostly inspired by the fact that people back in the ye old days didn't really understand anything about disease or about decomposition, about what happens to the body after you die. And so they kind of attached all these fairly bizarre stories to things they simply didn't understand. But anyway, I'm enjoying that. I'll be getting that finished probably tomorrow. Maybe it might take me a little longer after having 2 days of solid reading. I think I'm entitled to a little bit of a break, a little rest maybe. But yeah, I'll be getting back to it pretty soon because I'm really enjoying it. So that's it. Why you would want to spend 48 hours with me watching me read, I've no idea. I don't think reading's really a spectator sport, but there you are. I hope you've enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe and ring the notification bell and all those YouTube things. That would be great. I'd much appreciate it. And as I say, thank you very much for staying with me, and stay tuned for more videos next week. That's it. Thank you very much. Cheers.